The truck didn't belong there. That was the first thing Trent Briggs noticed. It sat crooked at the edge of his land like it had lost the will to park straight, dust-coated, engine ticking, heat rippling off the hood. No appointment. No call. Just showing up. Out here, on a Montana ranch where every visit meant something, that alone was a warning. Trent straightened slowly, fence pliers hanging loose in his right hand, sweat dripping off the brim of his hat. July heat pressed down hard, the kind that makes even seasoned ranchers move carefully, conserving energy. His eyes stayed locked on the truck as the driver's door creaked open, and the man who stepped out didn't meet his eyes. That told Trent everything. He'd known Alan Callahan for years. Contractor, fence work, reliable until recently. And recently, Alan owed him $3,000. Not a luxury amount, not extra money, the kind of money that decides whether irrigation gets fixed or fails. Alan walked slower than usual, boots dragging gravel like each step cost him something. His shoulders sagged, his hands buried deep in his jacket pockets despite the heat. No anger, no arrogance, just defeat. Trent had worn that same posture once, years ago, when a winter storm wiped out half his cattle. He recognized it instantly. "Trent," Alan said, voice rough, cracked at the edges. "We need to talk." That sentence never leads anywhere good. Alan didn't stall. He didn't lie. He didn't posture. He just told the truth. The market collapsed. Contracts vanished. Equipment repossessed. Business gone. Everything he'd built erased. "I don't have the money," Alan admitted. "Not now. Maybe not ever." Silence filled the space between them, thick and uncomfortable. Trent felt his jaw tighten. $3,000 wasn't charity money. Feed prices were up. Water was already becoming a concern. His bank account wasn't forgiving. But anger didn't come. Something else did. Because this wasn't a man dodging responsibility. This was a man already broken by it. "So," Trent finally said, measured calm, "what are you proposing?" Alan turned slowly toward the truck. Whistled. Sharp. Controlled. Almost ceremonial. For a second, nothing happened. Then something moved behind the trailer. And when it stepped into view, Trent actually thought he was being insulted. A horse emerged, or what barely qualified as one. It was skeletal, ribs sharp enough to count from across the yard. Coat dull and patchy, mane tangled with burrs and dried mud. Tail thin, uneven, missing hair. Its head hung low like gravity was too much effort. Its eyes were the worst part. Not wild, not angry, just empty. Trent had raised horses his entire life. Healthy ones had presence, awareness, a spark. This animal had none. Mud crusted its legs. Cuts and scrapes dotted its hide, some fresh, some infected. Hooves cracked and flared like they hadn't seen a farrier in months. Maybe longer. The horse shifted its weight and nearly stumbled. Trent felt something cold crawl up his spine. "You can't be serious," he said quietly. Alan swallowed. "Hard. She's all I've got left," he said. "I was going to sell her, but no one would even look. I know she's not worth what I owe you, but I can't let her die." That word hit harder than any argument. Trent stared at the horse again, then at Alan, then back at the horse. This wasn't payment. This was a burden, a responsibility, a potential disaster. Taking her meant vet bills, feed, time, no guarantees. And yet, walking away meant leaving her with a man who couldn't save her. Ranchers don't talk much about mercy, but they live by it. Trent exhaled slowly. "I'll take her," he said. Alan's head snapped up, eyes wide, disbelieving. "You're serious?" "Only on one condition," Trent replied. "Once she's mine, she's mine. No guilt, no regrets." Alan nodded immediately, too quickly, because this wasn't about money anymore. It was about survival. Neither of them noticed the brand, half hidden beneath the mud on the horse's flank. And that mark would change everything. "Tly." She lifted her head and met his gaze directly. Not fear, not submission, recognition. That night, Trent dug through old records, breeding notes, archived brand registries. Calls were made, messages left. Most went nowhere. Then one reply came back. A single sentence. "Can you send photos of the brand and full body conformation?" Trent stared at the screen longer than he should have. Because for the first time since that truck pulled up, the thought hit him hard. What if this wasn't a burden? What if this horse wasn't worthless? What if Alan hadn't handed him a problem, but something everyone else had failed to see? Trent didn't sleep that night. Not because of worry this time, but because of possibility. The photos sat open on his phone. The brand, the legs, the shoulder angle, the eyes. He'd taken them carefully at sunset when the light was honest and unforgiving. No tricks, no filters, just truth. The reply came at 4:17 a.m. Where did you get this horse? No greeting, no pleasantries. Just that. Trent typed back 2 words. Debt payment. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, reappeared, then a message that made his chest tighten. You need to understand something. If that brand is authentic, and I believe it is, you may be sitting on a bloodline that hasn't surfaced publicly in over a decade. Trent read it twice. Bloodline. That word didn't belong on his ranch. Bloodlines were for auction houses, elite barns, glossy catalogs. Not for skinny horses hauled in on broken trailers by desperate men. He set the phone down and walked outside. The horse stood quietly in the pen, head lifted, ears forward. Watching him, not flinching anymore, not fading into herself. Alive. Trent leaned on the fence and felt the weight of the past weeks settle in. Every early morning feeding, every vet visit, every dollar he'd spent without hesitation. If this was real, everything changed. But if it wasn't, then he'd still done the right thing. The next step came with a cost. DNA testing wasn't cheap, and it wasn't fast. Samples had to be taken properly. Chain of custody. Documentation. No shortcuts. Marcus returned that afternoon and raised an eyebrow when Trent explained. You sure you want to go down this road? Marcus asked. Once you do, there's no unknowing what you find. Trent nodded. I've already crossed that line. The sample was sent overnight. And then came the waiting. Days passed. Then a week. In that time, the horse continued to transform. Muscle returned in thin lines along her neck. Her gait smoothed out. Strength replaced fragility inch by inch. One morning, she broke into a short trot on her own, and Trent froze, breath caught in his throat. Because it wasn't clumsy. It was fluid, balanced, powerful. That night, Alan's name lit up Trent's phone. Trent hesitated before answering. Hey, Alan said quietly. No small talk. I've been thinking about her. Every day. Trent didn't interrupt. I just want to know, did she make it? Alan asked. Trent looked out toward the pen, toward the horse standing under the floodlight, head high. She did, Trent said, and she's doing better than anyone expected. A long pause. That's good, Alan finally said. His voice cracked just enough to hear. That's all I needed to know. They hung up without another word. The results arrived 3 days later. Trent was repairing a gate hinge when his phone buzzed. One email. Subject line, DNA analysis, verified lineage. His hands suddenly felt unsteady. He wiped them on his jeans and opened it. The words blur at first. Technical language. Registries. Genetic markers. Then one sentence stood out. This animal descends directly from a championship-grade sire line, previously valued in excess of 6 figures. Trent sat down hard on the dirt. 6 figures. The email continued. Details about rarity, breeding potential, auction estimates. Conservative numbers. Aggressive projections. But Trent barely read past the first confirmation. The horse he'd taken out of mercy, the animal everyone had written off, was worth more than his truck, more than his land payment that year, more than the debt Alan owed by a factor of 30. And suddenly, the decision he'd made in the heat of a July afternoon didn't feel small at all. It felt historic. But one question burned hotter than the rest. What happens now, when the world finds out? The truth didn't feel real. Even after reading the report again, even after Marcus confirmed it, even after a second expert reviewed the DNA markers and came back with the same conclusion, Trent still walked the fence line that morning like nothing had changed. Same boots, same dust, same cattle lowing in the distance. Except everything had changed. The horse, his horse, stood calmer now, stronger. Her coat carried a clean steel gray sheen in the sun. Her posture was different too, confident, grounded, like she finally remembered who she was. Trent didn't rush to tell anyone. Ranchers learn early that silence is protection. Word spreads fast in rural places, and not always in ways that help. A valuable animal draws attention. Attention draws pressure. Pressure draws trouble. So he waited, but the world didn't. 2 days later, a black SUV rolled up his driveway. Not dusty, not lost, purposeful. The man who stepped out wore clean boots that had never seen manure. He introduced himself as a representative for an equine investment group. Polite, professional, smiling just enough. "We were informed you may be in possession of a horse matching a rare genetic profile," the man said. Trent didn't invite him in. "You were informed wrong," Trent replied calmly. The man smiled wider. "I think we both know that's not true." That was the moment Trent understood how fast this had escalated. Someone talked. Someone confirmed. The man offered to take a look. Trent refused. The man countered with a number. 50,000. Cash. No paperwork beyond a simple transfer. No questions asked. Trent didn't even blink. "Not for sale," he said. The smile vanished. "Think carefully," the man warned. "Animals like that attract complications." Trent leaned against the fence, unshaken. So do men who show up uninvited. The SUV left in a hurry. That night, Trent locked every gate. Not out of fear, but out of principle. The next offer came by phone. Then another. Then a letter with a printed logo and embossed seal. 80,000. 90. Each one refused. Marcus shook his head when Trent told him. "You're sitting on a retirement," he said. Most people wouldn't hesitate. Trent scratched the horse's neck slowly. Thoughtful. "She wasn't bred to be flipped," he said. And neither was this decision. What no one else understood was this. Trent didn't just see value. He saw obligation. The horse trusted him now. Followed him without a rope. Slept standing close to the fence when he worked nearby. You don't break that trust for money. But the pressure didn't stop. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Trent found tire tracks near the far pasture. Fresh. Too close. And that's when the question stopped being, how much is she worth? And became, how far would others go to take her? The tracks weren't there by accident. Trent crouched near the fence line, fingers brushing the dirt. Fresh tread. Heavy tires. Not ranch traffic. Whoever came through hadn't gotten stuck, hadn't turned around, hadn't asked permission. They'd scouted. That realization settled into his bones. He spent the next day changing routines. Feeding earlier. Rotating pastures. Keeping the horse closer to the house at night. He didn't tell anyone. Not Marcus, not neighbors. The fewer people who knew, the better. But secrecy has a way of cracking under pressure. 3 days later, a certified letter arrived. Not an offer. A warning. It claimed the horse matched records of a high-value animal reported missing years earlier under disputed ownership circumstances. Legal language wrapped around a thinly veiled threat. Cooperate now, or face consequences later. Trent read it twice. Then a third time. Missing didn't mean stolen. Disputed didn't mean proven. And Trent knew something else too. If this horse had been truly valuable back then, she wouldn't have ended up starting on a trailer in Montana. That night, Alan called again. His voice was different this time. Tighter. Uneasy. "I had a guy come by my apartment," Alan said. "Asked about the horse." Trent closed his eyes. "What did you tell him?" "The truth," Alan replied. "That she was yours. That I signed her over. That I didn't want trouble." A pause. He didn't like that. After the call ended, Trent stood in the dark long after the phone went silent. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about control. The next morning, Trent made a decision he'd avoided his entire life. He lawyered up. Not flashy. Not aggressive. Just precise. Documentation gathered. Bills. Vet records. Signed transfer. Photos showing the horse's condition the day she arrived. Evidence. At the same time, something else happened. The horse began to change again. Not physically this time, but mentally. She watched the horizon constantly. Alert. Aware. When unfamiliar vehicles passed on the distant road, she positioned herself between Trent and the noise without being asked. Protective. One afternoon, a stranger approached the gate on foot. Claimed to be just curious. Asked questions that sounded innocent but weren't. "How old is she? Where'd you get her? Ever think of selling?" Trent answered none of them. The man left smiling. That night, the pasture lights flickered, then went dark. Trent grabbed his rifle, not to threaten, but to be ready. He stood on the porch until dawn, eyes scanning the fence line, listening to the night breathe. Nothing happened, and that scared him more than if something had. Because pressure doesn't disappear. It waits. And somewhere out there, someone believed that horse wasn't his. The question was simple. Would they try to take her, or force him to give her up? The pressure finally showed its teeth. It came on a Tuesday morning, quiet, ordinary, dangerous in its normalcy. Trent was halfway through feeding when a county truck rolled up. Not a sheriff. Not animal control. Something worse. Compliance. Two men stepped out. Clipboards. Polite smiles. Clean boots again. They said they'd received a complaint. Neglect. Improper ownership. Potential livestock endangerment. Trent didn't raise his voice. Didn't argue. He opened every gate. Handed over every record. Veit bills. Photos. Transfer documents. DNA results. He watched their faces change, slowly, as the paperwork stacked up. Still, one of them lingered on the horse longer than the other. Studied the brand. Took extra photos. Beautiful animal, the man said. Shame about the complications. Trent met his eyes. There aren't any. The inspection ended without citation, without apology, without closure. That afternoon, Trent's lawyer called. They're fishing, the lawyer said, but they don't have a hook yet. That night, Trent moved the horse again, closer than ever. A smaller pen, better lighting, cameras installed quietly, motion alerts set to his phone. He slept in boots. 2 nights later, the alert went off. 2:13 a.m. Movement near the far fence. Trent was outside in seconds. Light on. Heart pounding. He swept the pasture slowly. Nothing. No intruders. No broken white. No footprints. But the horse was awake. Standing rigid. Ears locked forward. Muscles coiled. Watching something Trent couldn't see. The next morning, a call came from an unfamiliar number. You've made this harder than it needs to be, the voice said. Calm. Male. Controlled. That horse doesn't belong in your world. Trent said nothing. Name your price, the voice continued. 6 figures. Cash. Today. Trent exhaled slowly. No. A pause. Then you're choosing the long way. The line went dead. That afternoon, Marcus showed up unannounced. I got a call, he said, from a colleague back east. Asked about the horse. Trent's jaw tightened. What did you say? That she's legally yours, Marcus replied, and that anyone who thinks otherwise better bring proof. Marcus hesitated. Trent, you know what this means, right? Trent nodded. It means she's more than valuable, Marcus continued. She's inconvenient. To the wrong people. That evening, Trent did something unexpected. He saddled the horse. Not to ride hard, just to feel her move. They walked the perimeter together as the sun dropped low. Her stride was smooth now. Powerful. Purposeful. This wasn't a rescued animal anymore. This was a contender. And somewhere someone else knew it. As they reached the far fence, headlights appeared on the road beyond the property. Slowed. Stopped. Watched. Then drove on. Trent didn't wave. Because this wasn't a standoff anymore. It was a countdown. The call came from an auction house Trent had only heard about in passing. Prestige. Legacy. Reputation. The kind of place where horses didn't just sell, they made history. The man on the line spoke carefully. Respectfully. We've reviewed the DNA, veterinary records, and independent confirmations, he said. What you have is exceptional. Trent listened without reacting. We'd like to extend an invitation, the man continued. Private viewing. No public listing. No media. An invitation sounded harmless. But Trent knew better. Visibility was exposure. And exposure was exactly what everyone else wanted. He didn't commit. He asked for time. That night, Alan called again. I think I messed up, Alan admitted. I sold a trailer last week. Guy asked about the horse. I didn't think. Trent stopped him. You didn't do anything wrong. Alan's voice cracked. If they come after you because of me. They won't, Trent said. And if they try, they'll fail. The horse shifted behind him, close enough to touch. Calm. Present. Trent realized something then. This wasn't about money, or pride, or even ownership. It was about stewardship. He agreed to the private viewing, but on his terms. No transport, no crowds, no photographs, just one representative. The man arrived alone 2 days later. Older, weathered, real boots this time. He walked the pasture slowly, said nothing, watched the horse move, breathe, respond. After 10 minutes, he removed his hat. "I've seen this line before," he said quietly. "Not many have." Trent waited. "She's not just valuable," the man continued. "She's rare. And she was lost." "Not lost," Trent corrected. "Abandoned." The man nodded. "Even so," he said, "there are people who believe she should never have reappeared." The offer came after that. $112,000. Guaranteed. Immediate. Clean. Trent felt the weight of it. Felt what it could solve. What it could secure. He looked at the horse. Then he shook his head. "No." The man didn't argue. Instead, he said something that froze Trent where he stood. "Then you should know this," he said. "If you don't sell her, she'll become famous. And famous animals don't get left alone." The truck left just before dusk. That night, Trent sat on the porch, rifle across his knees, not for violence, but for resolve. Because the next move wasn't his. The world had noticed, and it never forgets. Fame arrived without permission. It started small. A post, then a repost. A crop photo taken from the road. Someone recognized the brand. Someone else recognized the bloodline. Within 48 hours, Trent's quiet ranch was a dot on too many maps. The phone didn't stop. Offers. Warnings. Advice disguised as pressure. Sell now. Protect yourself. You're sitting on lightning. Trent turned the phone off. Because the horse hadn't changed. She still followed him at dusk. Still stood steady when the wind snapped the cottonwoods. Still lowered her head when he rested a hand on her neck. Trust earned the hard way. But the world around them tightened. A reporter showed up at the gate. Trent refused to open it. A drone buzzed once overhead and vanished. The cameras caught headlights slowing again on the road after dark. Then came the injunction, filed by a holding company with layers so thick it took Trent's lawyer 2 days to find a human name beneath it. The claim was narrow and sharp. Temporary seizure pending ownership review. Temporary. Seizure. Those 2 words hit harder than any offer. The hearing was scheduled fast. Too fast. A sign someone wanted momentum more than justice. Marcus sat beside Trent in the small courtroom, arms folded, jaw set. Alan wasn't there. He couldn't be. He'd done his part and vanished back into anonymity, the safest place for him now. The opposing counsel spoke smoothly, polished, confident. They painted a story of loss, misplacement, rightful reclamation. They avoided the photos of neglect, avoided the vet reports, avoided the reality that this horse had been thrown away. Trent's lawyer didn't raise his voice. He raised facts, dates, receipts, signed transfer, before and after images that silenced the room. Then the DNA report. The judge leaned forward, read carefully, looked at the brand photos, paused, a long pause. Finally, the ruling came, not final, but decisive. No seizure, no transfer, no movement of the animal pending full review. Protection. Outside, cameras waited. Trent walked past them without a word. Marcus clapped him on the shoulder once. "Firm. You just bought time," Marcus said. Trent knew better. Time buys choices. Choices bring consequences. That evening, as the sun burned red along the horizon, Trent stood by the fence and watched the horse move freely. Strong now, unmistakably powerful. No trace of the animal that had stepped off the trailer weeks ago. She stopped, turned, looked straight at him, and in that moment, Trent understood the final truth. Keeping her meant a lifetime of watching his back. Selling her meant surrendering something money couldn't replace. There was no safe ending anymore, only the right one. The quiet after the hearing was louder than any threat. No calls, no offers, no strangers at the gate, just space. And in that space, Trent felt the weight of the decision settle fully for the first time. Because winning protection didn't mean winning peace. It meant visibility. The auction house called again, not to buy this time, but to advise. "If you keep her," the man said carefully, "you'll need structure, insurance, public transparency, a narrative you control." Otherwise, others will write it for you. A narrative. Trent looked out at the pasture where the horse moved with easy strength now. Muscles clean and defined, stride effortless. She wasn't hiding anymore, and neither was the truth. That night, Trent did something he'd avoided. He told a story, on his terms. A simple post. No hype, no numbers, just facts. Where she came from, what conditions she arrived in, what it took to bring her back. He didn't name Alan. He didn't name offers. He didn't name enemies. He named responsibility. The response was immediate and different. Not pressure. Support. Veterans. Ranchers. Breeders. People who recognize care over profit. Messages poured in offering help, protection, resources. Not everyone wanted a piece. Some just wanted to stand guard. And for the first time since July, Trent slept without boots on. Weeks passed. The injunction quietly expired. No new filings followed. No further challenges came. The holding company dissolved into silence. Pressure had limits. The horse continued to thrive. She trained lightly, consistently, purposefully, not for sale, but for proof. Proof that value doesn't vanish just because the world stops looking. One afternoon, Marcus watched her move and shook his head. She could win, he said. Easily. Trent smiled faintly. She already did. But one final question remained. Not legal, not financial, personal. What do you do when doing the right thing costs you the easiest future? Trent stood at the fence as the sun dipped low, knowing the answer had already been chosen. The final step wasn't about money. It was about legacy. Trent never sold her. That's the part people still ask about. They expect a twist where the numbers get bigger, where the rancher cashes out, where the story ends with a wire transfer and a satisfied smile. It didn't. Instead, Trent registered her properly, publicly, transparently. No secrets left to exploit. He named her Resolve, not for what she was worth, but for what it took to keep her. She entered selective exhibitions, not auctions. Appeared rarely, carefully, always under Trent's terms. The attention shifted from speculation to respect. The threats faded. The watchers moved on. Because once something is protected by daylight, it stops being useful in the dark. Alan came by the ranch 1 year later. He stood quietly at the fence, hands in his pockets again, but this time his shoulders were straight. She looks unreal, Alan said softly. Trent nodded. She always was. Alan swallowed. I hear she's worth more than ever now. Trent glanced at him. That was never the point. Alan smiled. A real one this time. Resolve walked over and stopped between them. Calm, confident, alive. Trent rested a hand on her neck and felt the steady power beneath the skin. Not rescued anymore. Not owned in the way people think. Chosen. Years later, people still debate the decision. Some call Trent foolish. Others call him principled. Most just wonder what they would have done in his place. But the truth is simple. That skinny horse was never payment. She was a test. And Trent passed it. Because sometimes the real reward isn't what you sell. It's what you refuse to.